Good afternoon. My name is John Gibongo, publisher of The Elephant, and this afternoon it's my great pleasure to be joined as part of this series that The Elephant has been running on the COVID-19 pandemic by four of Africa's really outstanding editorial cartoonists. It's rare that we have them all together in one place, so we're very happy to be hosting them as The Elephant. And I'll just introduce all of you. I'll start with the ladies. We have Miss Alaa Satir. Have I pronounced it properly?
Yeah, Alaa Satir. Yeah.
Alaa Satir, who's from the Sudan, is currently in London. And Alaa, I found out you're an architect trained at the University of Khartoum.
Yeah, that's true.
And found your way into editorial cartooning. And then we have Kenya's very own Celeste Wamiru, who is East Africa's first female editorial cartoonist. So it's a pleasure and honor to have you here. And then we have Mr. Jonathan Shapiro, the great Zapiro from South Africa, world-renowned editorial cartoonist. It's great to be here. And you're joining us from Pretoria this afternoon.
Actually from Cape Town.
Yeah. From Cape Town. You're joining us from Cape Town this afternoon. Welcome. And finally, we have my brother here, another world-renowned cartoonist, Gado, aka Godfrey Mwapembwa, citizen of East Africa, originally from Tanzania, based in Kenya, citizen of the world as well. Welcome. The scourge of dictators all over the world. All of you, I'm very lucky. So let me start with a very simple question for each one of you. How are you doing? I think all of you are in some form of lockdown because of this COVID. How are you doing? How's life? How are you coping? How are you managing? What's lockdown like for an editorial cartoonist? It must provide a lot of material.
Let me start by saying, for me, lockdown is treating me well. I've always worked from home anyway, and I've always been behind the scenes. Even when I worked for newspapers, I'd prefer to do my work from home and just go to the newsroom once in a while for an editorial meeting. So for me, this is my comfort zone. I'm actually telling everyone, you see, this is the life that I'm already used to. So I'm pretty much just, it's life as usual for me. My family is well. Some of them are in the country, some of them are out of the country, but we keep in touch regularly and they're doing well.
Thank you, Celeste.
Same as Celeste, actually. I'm kind of used to working at home because I worked as a freelancer for a while. So being indoors is not something that bothers me so much, but it's I think that it's not knowing what's going to happen next or when it's going to end. Maybe that's the part that triggers the anxiety, maybe. And I have also my family is back home, and the cases are raising every day. So I just try to keep in touch as much as I can and try to make sure that they're fine. But other than that, I'm just trying to take it one day at a time, trying to work as much as I could to kind of keep myself busy. But other than that, yeah, I'm actually fine. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Alaa. Jonathan.
That I'm not surprised to hear both Celeste and Alaa say we're quite used to. Look, cartoonists are solitary beasts. We're used to working in our studios. We're used to a kind of almost a bit of a hermit-like existence where we sort of come out and like moles that come out and see the light every now and then. And we can be quite sociable when we're out and about. But we are quite used to this sort of thing. And I've been saying the same thing as they have. The difference with Alaa and your family being at home in possibly difficult circumstances and you being far apart, that's very different. But other than that, the idea that we are quite used to some of these sort of circumstances. There are a lot of people I know are really freaking out, and I haven't. I'm also lucky that we have a relatively big area in our house. I mean, we have serious lockdown here, and we haven't been allowed out at all except to go. I've been out twice in 5 weeks to do shopping. Other people in my household have been out as well a couple of times, but we can, you know, run around the house and do exercise and all that, and not everyone has that amount of space. So I do understand that it's different on many levels for me.
Thank you. Gado, you're with us here in Nairobi as well. What's lockdown like for you?
Yeah, it has been, I mean, just like what my colleague said, I mean, very much, I mean, I quickly adjusted. I mean, I've been working from home. I mean, from time to time, I do work at home. So it has been interesting. The interesting part is because the kids are at home, and so we have 2 girls, and they are doing their lessons now online. So sometimes they need, you know, not supervision as such because they're big girls, but this and that, and sometimes also you have to share our, you know, computers and all that. So that has been interesting, but it has been good. I've probably also gone to town a few times to collect supplies and 1 or 2 things from the office. So that has been it has gone well. The challenge probably as an editorial cartoonist, that has gone well, but as a producer of TV producer and an animator, because I work with you know, other creatives, it has been a little bit tough to adjust because there are a couple of stuff that, you know, we do physically. And so at the Booney studio, where I'm a co-founder, it has been difficult to adjust, but we you know, have done that. And you know, we have set up also remote Zoom and Skype meetings that now are working fine. I do, you know, so I showed you guys, I have this adjustable table. I couldn't bring a much bigger table that I have in the office. I had to sort of like bring sort of a tools that I could carry. I was talking to Jonathan, you know, a few days ago that I've actually run more. Now I think I'm ready for the Nairobi Marathon, you know, in November. So it has been great in terms of keeping fit and trying to stay focused.
Great. One of the powerful things that editorial cartoonists are able to do that no other form of media is able to express is to survey situations as they unfold in society and to represent them with great clarity. At a time when events make rational analysis of what's going on quite gray sometimes. You know, we are all in lockdown, in some form of lockdown right now. You know, many of us come from societies where, you know, some of our lockdowns are quite securitized, militarized, and so we come from countries where too many policemen or soldiers on the streets, on the road, is never a good thing, even if it's for a good cause like dealing with the COVID pandemic. And so in Kenya, for example, there has been debate. There are those who are for an even more forceful, more draconian crackdown so that we can try and flatten the curve, as they call it, with regard to the pandemic. But also, I mean, there's tremendous concern about this COVID-19 being used as an opportunity by authoritarians to roll back freedoms which have been hard-won. And so I wanted to ask your opinions on that to start with, but then also ask how one deals with humor in a situation like this, where you're talking about something that is so frightening and causes so much anxiety to people, like COVID-19, this invisible viral enemy that has attacked us. And I'll just put that out there, and whoever wants to respond first, please come in.
Can I say something about our situation here? And there's actually a wonderful.
I think.
Oh, sorry, God. You go first.
No, go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay. When you were asking, John, about the how you deal with things, how you have humor when there are these difficult situations, in many respects, that's no different from what we deal with every day. It's just that all the focus is now on COVID-19 and how it's affecting us. But dealing with dire situations, whether it's HIV/AIDS or army and police under normal circumstances, or many of the other things that we're talking about, war and the way people are affected in different ways, inequality. We are constantly trying to draw the humor out, saying that in a sense that isn't particularly different. I think there's a heightened sense of being aware of the privilege of having of how one is affected in lockdown compared to how people who are not in a privileged situation are affected, because it's like two different worlds. I mean, I was saying earlier, and I think we were all saying, we haven't been terribly badly affected by lockdown, but in people in deprived situations in South Africa, where you have one of the greatest Gini coefficients in the world, the tremendous inequality between rich and poor, often also a racial thing still in South Africa. You do have to be aware of that. And most of the cartoons I've done have really been trying to look at those difficulties. Funnily enough, just as it happens on Workers' Day, a middle-class cartoon is springing to mind, and I think I'm going to have a little apology for a middle-class cartoon on Workers' Day. But that's I just wanted to say one other thing. We have a great satirist in South Africa who some of you may have heard of, Peter Dirk Ace, whose alter ego is Evita Besaidenout, a wonderful sort of a drag. He plays a female character called Evita Besaidenout, and she comments in an ironic way. He's been doing this for the past sort of 3.5 decades. Absolutely brilliant. And Peter Dirk has often said that satire has to have, humor has to have 51% satire and 49% anger. And if the anger becomes 51%, or if more than half of it is anger and less than half of it is the satire, it's not funny anymore. So that balance is something that we're always looking at. And I love that thing. I often talk about that very sharp insight, I think, that he brings to satire.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, I mean, where Jonathan left off, I mean, the balance, that is also something that is ordinarily, satirists struggle with that, and so one of the interesting things that this crisis for me reminded me of the 2008 crisis that Kenya got itself into. And the challenge is always sometimes to balance the public good and the criticism. And so I have, at a personal level, very much also one of the things is that everybody out there has been trying to do his bit, and I've gone out of my way to do certain drawings that are outrightly basically the public service, in terms of saying this is actually you need to do in terms of for example, whose guidelines in terms of fighting the COVID-19. I know Jonathan has done pretty much the same when it comes to that. So that has become also part and parcel of what we do. Now, at the end of the day, as John eloquently put it, at the end of the day, also satirists have to be pretty vigilant during this time, because it's also, especially in these parts of the world, also it's, you know, you have also authoritarian and dictators. These are times when actually they actually tighten their grip and actually to do all manners of things. I mean, we have seen here in Kenya, for example, what already we are hearing scandals in the Ministry of Health. And I remember doing a drawing pretty much earlier, I think last month, where I had you know, the president, vice president, and the honorable former prime minister all together, you know, sort of like discussing, the president telling them, look, there are opportunities on this, on as far as this tragedy is concerned. I mean, look, there are also all manners of tenders. It's a win-win situation. And the idea back then, not knowing that we'll have scandals now, was also is that we need actually to remain as vigilant as possible, because we know historically that these are times when also you have all manners of things going on. So I think that's also something that at a personal have been trying to deal with in terms of also balancing, you know, what you know, the message on a day-to-day basis. Of course, it's important, as Jonathan said. I mean, we are very much privileged, you know, in our position, and I think also I've tried also to look at the less privileged. How do we address those issues as far as the less privileged are concerned? I mean, we talked about, for example, the crisis in the education system, the looking forward, food distribution, and so forth. So I have also tried very much to look at that kind of situation, and we're very much being aware also that you know, it is also said that you know good journalism is always to inflict the comfortable, and if to paraphrase this is to inflict. I'm not sure if I'm getting this, but you know, to make sure that you stay focused and police the authoritarian, and basically continuing to tell truth to power.
Thanks, Gado. That was pretty deep. What I would add to that is just to say that as cartoonists, our conditioning is such that we have our antennas up all the time. Yeah, we are always looking at every issue, every situation that presents itself, not just at the face value, but you know, we have developed deep critical thinking. And with the arrival of COVID, which has literally changed everything, all facets of life have been affected by COVID. And it has found, when we already are in the conditioning to critically think about the impact of COVID to the masses, the impact of COVID to leadership, the impact of COVID to pretty much all facets of our life. And when you say we are the last people standing, I think we were found prepared for the role, and it nothing has changed for us, because like Shapiro said, it's what we do anyway. Our role is to question a lot of what's happening, to call to book what's going on around us. So I would say that if we continue playing that role, keep doing cartoons in a way that it's the voice of the people, because we listen a lot. There are many things that, let's say, a writer doing an article in a newspaper cannot write because of defamation and, you know, libel. But with the medium that we have, I think it presents us with a really good opportunity to be able to speak some of these issues visually in a way that, gets people to talk about, to have conversations around taboo topics, authoritarianship, how our leaders may want to use this opportunity to, clamp down on human rights and freedoms, because any crisis brings out the true nature of a human being. Yeah, it's fight or flight. Some people see this as an opportunity to make a kill, steal. No one will ask them because it was during a crisis. So by virtue of us having that conditioning, of having our antennas up and questioning, I think we get to remind the masses not just to look at things at face value, but to think deeper and question what's happening in these COVID times. Thank you.
Thanks, Celeste.
Yeah, maybe I would just add to your point, because I think you are right, like cartoonist is your way, is your role to look outside of yourself, outside of your situation, and try to see how everything is happening in other places as well. So I think this is like the perfect example. We have the same virus that's hitting everyone, and it's the same situation that's happening to everyone, but at the same time it's hitting people differently, and it's affecting people differently. So for some, it could be the frustration of being locked inside or not knowing what's going to happen next, or maybe this is the situation that we are in right now. But if you just look outside of yourself a bit, you will find that this has a bigger impact on other societies or other countries that are a bit more fragile. So me being in London right now and comparing what's happening here to what's happening back in Sudan is just, there is a massive difference. And as much as here the healthcare system is struggling and everything, and the cases are rapidly increasing and everything, but in Sudan it's not just the virus that they have to deal with. I mean, you mentioned the security forces, for example, to make sure that the lockdown is under control. That means that citizens have to deal with security forces as well, which is something that we kind of traumatized from, because it's always been a corrupted system. It's always the relationship between security in all its forms and the citizens has always been a very heated, very violent relationship. So a lot of people are actually scared to go outside, not just because of the virus, because they don't want to be harassed in any way. They don't want to be verbally or even physically abused by police forces, who always find a way or just jump into the chance to say something or do something that's not very pleasant. So they have to deal with this, and also at the same time, not everyone has the enough income to or have enough savings to last them for a month. Everyone is almost relying on a daily income or a monthly income. So that's also a big problem. It's harder not to see that for some people it's way bigger than the virus. It's having to deal with the problems that they have to deal with every day, but now in extreme conditions. So it's also something that as cartoonists, I think it's our duty to kind of pay attention to that. Even if we are in a more privileged situation right now, we just have to look outside of ourselves and just see what other people are dealing with.
Yeah, just to jump into that, just to the point was to push Alaa's point. Yes, you have an economy in Kenya whereby people depend on their day-to-day activities to go out, sell stuff, and actually go home, buy stuff for their family. When you cut that one out, how do you expect people to stay in a lockdown? I mean, we have seen countless of videos whereby people are coming out to say, "Look, I cannot stay and die in the house. I actually need to go out and get something to eat." So there are certain issues that fundamental issues that also we have also as satirists and cartoonists have to be aware of all the time. And that lands me to the point that I was actually making earlier. Is the role of a good journalist is to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. I think it's always attributed to Peter Finley Dune in the early 90s. And so, you are, as an editorial cartoonist, you are confronted by these weighty matters. And definitely, my colleagues will attest to this, that you actually have to, they weigh on you in a matter that you actually have to make sure that, yes, you don't afflict the poor and the in your argument, and the at the same time you very much keep you police the authority and the government.
Can I also follow up on something there? I think all three of my colleagues and I have tried to show that we really are aware of that, of what is happening to the majority of the people and the poor, and that is that, and the people who are most persecuted in society. And I think so. Yeah, just reinforce that point. And I agree with everything that everybody's been saying. The a couple more things that I'd just like to add on. That idea of the balancing the needs of the regulation against the virus on the one hand, and the economy getting going on the other. That balance that we're seeing everywhere in the world. That's something that we are also having to look at, and then and trying to make our own decisions. As Celeste was saying, don't take things at face value. We actually we have agency. We are able to both support the general idea of lockdown and being responsible and all of that, but at the same time say perhaps we have a difference with the way that it is being done, because it is just too punitive on people who have no means of getting income, or what the government is promising in terms of payments or one-off payments and all that is just too hard to access. So you really have to, and then that's when you see the police and the army have, certainly in our instance in South Africa, I'm sure it is happening in other places as well. And as Alaa was saying in Sudan, they don't have any, they don't appear to show any empathy with people who are having to do things out of desperation. Their families are starving. So that's, but then to go back again to that point that Celeste made about not seeing things at face value, not taking things at face value, is one other big point that we as cartoonists are able to participate in, is the debunking of fake news. Because fake news, especially when you've got the president of the most powerful country in the world who indulges in fake news and calls everyone else who's against him proponents of fake news. And then you've got other people who support that way of thinking. Fake news has become a really scary thing, especially on WhatsApp. People pass on information. I've been doing cartoons that try and shame the people who just pass on that information without fact-checking it, without checking that it comes from a reliable source. That's been a big subject for me, the fake news.
Great. It strikes me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you talked about the agency that you have as editorial cartoonist. I would go further. As I said, even the whole title of this conversation was the last women and men standing, because in terms of editorial clarity, the cartoonists have remained the last. They're the last vanguard. The editorial writers can waffle around an issue and generally say what they want to say, but make sure that they're keeping they're managing political, commercial, and interest as well. But cartoonists have a freedom there that is not available to many others in mainstream media. And for me, it took me back to 2015 and the whole Charlie Hebdo crisis that brought editorial cartoonists into very stark focus. And I wanted to ask, I mean, that was, really a crisis that was, brought upon by a direct attack against cartoonists in a manner that we had never seen before. And so the question I want to ask is, what is your perception, or how would you articulate how the role of the editorial cartoonist has changed over the decades? It feels to me that today in 2020, the editorial cartoonist occupies a far larger, space in the public imagination than was even the case 20 years ago. And that's partly as other institutions and have lost credibility, as people have lost confidence in political leaders and political parties, when mainstream media is facing so many challenges commercially, politically. But there you have it, the editorial cartoonist. You get a lot of truth in a small space. But then we've seen some fairly aggressive pushbacks against cartoonists, some which are quite unprecedented, like the murder of cartoonists around the Charlie Hebdo affair, and in other countries as well, the arrest of editorial cartoonists, their imprisonment, their harassment, and sometimes authoritarian leaders take advantage of moments like these to clamp down. But I just wanted you to give me to give viewers a sense of how your own circumstances as some of our leading editorial cartoonists on the continent have changed as your agency and centrality to the truth has become more and more important. In the 1970s, editorial cartoonists never really got into trouble. But now it seems you're in trouble all the time. And which is also, it shows you've been successful. What does it mean in your everyday? As Gado says, you
afflict the comfortable.
You have to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted.
Yes, that is making life uncomfortable for usually very powerful people. And groups that can respond. But how have you had to sort of navigate this territory, especially over the last 5 years when things seem to have gotten more difficult for cartoonists?
So I think ladies first again.
All right, I'll go first. For me, I think I'm pretty lucky because I came into this space when a lot of freedoms had already been, fought for by the likes of Gado, at least in this country. However, there's at the back of my mind, there's always the thought, it's a medium that we use to express a lot of issues and a lot of criticism that we see happening, and we want to express it. However, it's not just about the freedom of expression, it's not just about the freedom of speech. It's also about freedom after speech. Because, you can say something and it flies, but what are the repercussions? And especially in this digital age, where there is cyberbullying, there is litigation, you could be sued. In worst case circumstances, you could be pursued extrajudicially, So there's always at the back of the mind, that concern, about freedom after speech, after your work has gone out there and it's being consumed. crazy people out there who might want to push back in, crazy ways. And we have to find a way to be safe as much as we are putting our work and our opinions out there. Find a way to be safe, to shield ourselves from all that, pushback, because sometimes it's nasty. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think as you were saying, like it's all about freedom after speech, because a lot of people actually have the guts to speak their mind, but then the things that happen after that is what we're trying to prevent. But I think especially growing up in a country where like dictatorship was happening for years, it kind of makes sense why a perfect dictatorship, or it prevents people from speaking their mind, because once you start criticizing the system or criticizing authority, it means that you have the power to take it down. So to cut that from the roots, you just ask people not to speak or punish them if they do, because that means they have that critical thinking and they have the bravery and the courage to speak their mind, which means they have also the courage to take that system down. So it's been like that for a very long time, even though like Sudanese people are very outspoken when it comes to even politics, but they do it like in very private, very small gatherings, but it's not in a grand way. It didn't happen until the revolution actually started, and then people were expressing themselves more. And we never really realized how much these kind of cartoons that we do, or these murals that were in the street, kind of frightens them until the revolution happened, and they were wiping out everyone's work. They were trying to erase any sign of protest, even if it was like a small drawing or a cartoon. So that gives you perspective on how powerful these kind of things are and how they are afraid of that happening. And just also going back to Gado's point of always trying to just know what's your target. I mean, who are you trying to criticize? It's important. What is the goal of that cartoon that you're doing? What is it trying to do? Who are you trying to criticize? It's just something that you have to bear in mind. And freedom of speech is something that I of course, I'm here for. And you have the freedom to do whatever you want. But what kind of cartoonist that you want to be? What kind of questions that you want to put out there? What kind of conversations that you want to start? That's something that should be a conversation that you have to have with yourself. And even in this time, there is hardly any cartoons in Sudan that criticizes the government right now, because we do know that it is a transitional government that we didn't elect, but we fought for it to be there. So we are just trying to be patient, I guess, and trying to support the government that we kind of fought hard to that. So it's for it to be in power. And even it was to the extent that there was like fundraising happening, that everyone started donating money to the government so they can fix the health system problem that we're having. So the support, it was done to that extent that people are actually donating money. So that's why maybe most of the cartoons that we see is maybe talking about the pandemic, but rarely touches on the government or their role in this. We are trying to just give them the benefit of the doubt, or give them like space. We know that it's really hard to take charge after 30 years or more of corruption, and we just try to bear that in mind, I guess.
I'd like to go back to the premise of your question, John, about not only about my situation, what it's been like, but in the premise of your question was there was the possibility that cartoons have come into sharper focus, that have been more contentious, whatever. I think on a global scale, yes, because of the way that media works in the 21st century. The very first of those huge things was not 2015, of course, but was in 2006. The Danish prophet Muhammad cartoon debacle and what happened after that. Oh, yeah. And then there's a series of things since then, and then of course the Charlie Hebdo and other things. But if you think about cartoons over the last 250 years, there have been many very, very key events, some in France, some in United States, some Thomas Nast in the 19th century in the United States helping to bring down the Tammany Hall corrupt empire of Boss Tweed. You know, there's been movies about that. There have been huge interventions of cartoonists over the years, and they've been really powerful. I mean, one could list a huge number. I remember in around about 2000, there was a meeting of Southern African cartoonists in Botswana, in Gaborone, the first time that we got together, a whole bunch of us from 7 countries. And the invited guest was Professor John Lent, who is an absolute treasure of cartooning around the world. Yeah, he's focused on IJOCA, the International Journal of Comic Art, and his main lecture, his main talk was about how cartoonists under persecution have been able to say things that other people in society were unable to say. Sometimes through hidden meanings and things that the authorities were not quite in tune with, were not quite aware of. So all of that kind of stuff, we're talking about often about cartoons in either in democracies or in a situation where where it's kind of teetering. But really, if you focus on what cartoonists have sometimes been able to accomplish under deep persecution, and sometimes not through mainstream media, I think there's been cartoonists have actually managed to do a tremendous amount. I just back to my own personal circumstances. I mean, it was in the mid 80s really that I experienced the sort of early to mid 80s and through the 80s that I experienced little bits of persecution. Nothing like, you know, the majority of the population in South Africa, of course, and being white has a huge amount to do with that. There were actually no black cartoonists who were able to get going in South Africa. Every now and then there'd be a cartoon here, a cartoon there, but they had no opportunities at all. I was lucky enough to have the opportunity, even though I was actually jailed. And not for a specific cartoon, but they were worried about my activity. So I felt what it was like under some sort of persecution and working under apartheid. And then I had this fantastic experience of being a cartoonist during the beginning of democracy and under Nelson Mandela, who's behind me here, and who absolutely loved the cartoons. And that was a really interesting experience because I had to figure out, how do you criticize the government or some of the ministers when you generally support where the country is going? And in a sense, I'm feeling that same situation now under what's happening with the lockdown, COVID-19. I support essentially what the government has been trying to do, but there are individual acts or individual ministers, certain things that I've got to then use critical thinking and say, well, I don't support that. So there's that. Then I moved into a situation under Thabo Mbeki with the AIDS, absolutely, where he was an AIDS denialist, and I was suddenly found myself in real contention and being seen as an enemy. And then even more so under Jacob Zuma with massive corruption. So I've sort of experienced a whole lot. I'll say the last thing I'll say there is that Gado will know that after that, during that issue of the Charlie Hebdo, I was actually going to come to Gado had invited me to Kenya. And I had a gut feeling that I was vulnerable because of some of the cartoons I had done. And 2 years later, I was contacted by authorities who picked up the fact that there was, in fact, a plot to kill me at exactly the time when I was worried about coming to Kenya to the conference that Gado had organized. And there was, in fact, a South African and Kenyan connection involved. So I can't go into it in too much more detail. But yeah, and going back to what all of our colleagues have been saying, you've got to be the cartoonist who you think you should be. You're not out to get belly laughs only. You're out to actually really say what you believe, and that will get you into trouble sometimes under any circumstances.
Yeah.
Um,
No, for certain, yeah. And just to, I think Jonathan has summarized it pretty well. But you know, I go back also to the if you are to look at what happened to Charlie Hebdo, and it's important sometimes to put you know, things into context. I think, yes, there has been, as Jonathan said, I mean, there have been so many events, you know, over the centuries about, you know, the role and what cartoonists have not only accomplished, but what editorial cartoonists have managed to do. It's very instructive to note that, you know, it's the very nature of what we do that actually sometimes, you know, provoke such reactions. I think some of them have been pretty extreme. But one of the things that also one has to understand is, I think with the advent of internet, we have seen also that you know, has actually opened up the space. And so you have also have you know, this huge space where you have actually, despite the challenges that we get from the mainstream media, there is also an opportunity to put your work out there. I think one of the things that actually has always helped me with my contracts with newspapers is when they actually cannot actually go ahead and publish my drawings, I have every right to publish them online. And so that also has pretty much helped the environment, in the sense that you have now, you know, whatever happens there, you know, your work will be seen by your audience, and also be picked by other media houses. But it is also one of the things that which is very instructive to note here, is that you have to see from the Muhammad cartoons to date, you have seen actually that persecution going on. Today, actually, in the United States, you have editorial cartoonists who are being sacked for criticizing President Trump. I mean, who would have thought that would happen just probably 5 or 6 years ago? That is happening. We have seen satirists and cartoonists being persecuted, and so this has been going on. This will go on, in my view. That you have, you know, authoritarian leaders, dictators would continue doing this, would find, you know, in one way or another, find tools to suppress cartoonists and satirists. Then the other important thing is that, with, I think Jonathan addressed earlier, is that the emergency of fake news. And so also artists are now battling with that you know, emerging phenomena, where, you know, you have not only in our work, in doing our work, but also, I think probably we have all experienced, whereby also you have a situation where other people actually take our drawings and actually concoct stuff out of them and then post them again, which has become also a major problem. So I anticipate, I think that you know, will probably continue and go on. During this time around, I think the same has been happening. We have spoken about certain regimes basically during this time around to basically make sure that they are using the securitized countries and using security to actually come down on the media. And of course, cartoonists are part of and parcel of that. They are victims of that. And so it's outrightly important that you know, artists and cartoonists and satirists remain vigilant when it comes to actually to defending that tough. And lastly, it's always I think challenging. All my colleagues have faced that you are artists and satirists are going to annoy and piss off the authoritarian leaders and dictators. There's no doubt about it. So the last thing you want to do is actually to worry about that. I think one of the things that you must be aware is that you are just the very nature of what we do does that, and so whereas we have to be cognizant of our audience, and in my opinion, I think whereas I've always said I have freedom of choice in terms of what I do, but I'm not so much concerned most of the time about the whether I am I don't know how to put this. Most of the time, sometimes artists or satirists are afraid that I think I'm more comfortable once I actually raise important questions in my drawings, as opposed to being, spot on, factual and truthful. Most of the time, I think the satire gives you that latitude to do that. And I think effective cartoonists and effective cartoons, you use that effectively by actually, stretching that your point. So we have seen, I have seen even during this time around that whereby I've had criticism about probably some of the drawings that I've done. And I think that will continue. That's the nature of what artists and cartoonists do.
John, if I may, you had asked also about what the current perceptions about cartoons are, and if the space is seemingly expanded. I think what I'd like to say about that is, for sure, the way people consume media is changing and has changed over the years. And right now, most of the communication is being made to be visual and interactive. Yeah, and by virtue of our cartoons falling in that category, then they get more views, more shares, and people are able to consume it, on a very personal level on their phones. And so in that sense, yes, the space has expanded, and it seems like now more than ever, cartoons actually are more visible and have greater impact. Having said that, there's also the whole point that mainstream media right now is sort of competing with social media, in the sense that who breaks the news fast, and in most cases, social media wins, and the difference is, unlike a newspaper where you'd have to wait for the next day to see the cartoon, once the cartoon goes online, people are able to react to it immediately, and they sort of have a sense of instant right of reply. Comments will start flowing in, and that has really changed the vibrancy and the way that cartoons are consumed today.
And of course, just to add to the point, there's a point that there's an economic angle to all that. I think the challenge with the social media and the internet is that, yes, there, cartoonists also, and satirists have to pay rent. And so just like many businesses, I mean, artists and satirists and cartoonists are trying also to figure out how to make a living out of their work that they do to online and to online publications.
Thank you. It's quite incredible how quickly 1 hour can pass when you're having a stimulating discussion. But I just want to force in a couple of last questions. I think, a number of you have mentioned what's happening in the United States with regards to the current administration's attitude towards the media there. But we've also seen major changes in other big democracies like India, where the atmosphere has changed. And then there are other major countries, Turkey, China, Russia, etc. I just wanted you to, at this time when we are grappling with the COVID pandemic, what's the sense you are getting from your colleagues in editorial cartoonist circles? What is the environment like in this day and age for them, as we see challenges being faced even in these established democracies, not only challenges but sometimes outright hostility. And then finally, just to satisfy my own sort of sense of mischief, in your various jurisdictions, in your various countries, what really bothers the politicians the most when you draw it? I remember Gado here in Kenya actually stopped drawing our politicians as themselves, and he started drawing a bunch of animals, the hyena, a vulture, a drooling pig, etc., etc. But this seemed to upset the politicians much more, even though these pigs and these animals do not have anyone's name on them. So I found that a very interesting sort of speaking truth to power. I mean, and then Shapiro, in a sense, you feel poor Jacob Zuma, for the rest of his life, he'll sort of walk around with a shower on top of his head because of your cartoon. I mean, that is their power. But I just wanted to ask, what seems to bother? I'm sure you get feedback all the time online and telephone calls and that. What seems to particularly bother the powerful that maybe you had not expected as we go to close? It's an open question.
Okay, since you've mentioned the Jacob Zuma thing, I mean that is, well, if there's one thing I think I've done if I can say I've done anything for humanity, put that shower on that. Because at the time I experienced a lot of pushback, a lot of animosity. The whole of the ANC, which is the party I supported, and as an activist, that I came out of that tradition of struggle, and there were people there who felt I was being treacherous. I was being a traitor to do this, especially as he got closer to becoming president. They said, you can't have a president with a shower on his head. I said, well, where is there a rule that says that? What does that even mean? And secondly, it's part of the parallel universe that we are set up in the same way as animal depictions, etc. But there's such a strange lack of understanding on the part of those who don't want to understand. I think the general public understands satire, but then there is a sort of almost a deliberate obtuseness where something hurts. And in the Jacob Zuma thing, it definitely hurt. I see, say, for example, with some of the current politicians, the more kind of vain ones, the ones where you show them up as being hypocrites. And that can be a very broad thing. There's one in particular, one particular minister who I basically did a cartoon where he was doing a hell of a lot of big talk. So I had all this sort of talk in the one thing and then action. And I just had a blank space, and because he wasn't really doing anything, it was all talk. He went ballistic. He actually had a version of the same cartoon where he filled in all the things that he felt he had done, and then this went on as a sort of a dialogue between me and him for over about 3 or 4 different cartoons. Now that was one that it really worked, where you feel like you get under the skin and you show them up as doing nothing, where they're talking big. That for me is one of the things that they don't like. So yeah, I don't know what my colleagues would say.
Yeah, I think you know, in my case, I think it's you know, if I'm to start with the first question, I think it's yeah, globally, I think you asked about what you know, the sense that I get from my colleagues, the few that I've spoken to, is that it's the same that I feel, is that it's these are times to be as vigilant as possible. I think, you know, the levels differ. I mean, if you go to countries, you know, Far East countries and Middle East countries, you know, you how the authority have acted has been slightly different. I've seen actually quite interesting cartoons about China and COVID from China, which was actually quite interesting. I mean, quite some very, you know, rough and ferocious cartoons from China. So that gives me heart, and it tells you that, you know, it's also one of those mediums that is very difficult to police. I mean, you can do as much as you want, and we have seen throughout history, but satirists and cartoonists would find a way of addressing these issues, one way or the other. So it's a loose situation for authoritarian leaders, and I think that's what I've learned over the years. But in terms of what you know, the second, you know, question you had, it has always been baffling for me. I have one rule of thumb that I've always said, that I keep, you know, politicians as far you know, at arm's length, as far as away as I can, because I always find them very strange and creatures. I mean, these are. I sometimes pity journalists who have to actually engage them. Of course, with a few exceptions. I mean, there are politicians I've admired over the years, and I've wished to meet them. But majority of them are puzzling. And one of the things that I've found that is interesting is that, or rather, that is true, is I think satire has the power to basically undress politicians. You know, it's basically to tell, you know, to tell it as it is, and to show, you know, what they are. You know, the old adage of the naked emperor. And so I think that is to be central to their reaction, that that actually they can be undressed. I think that is something that they, small wonder they come out reacting in the manner that they react. And I think Jonathan, myself, and this is all over the globe, the pressures that we have faced, you know, when it comes to our drawing. I mean, we are not exceptionals at all. I mean, for example, the animals that you're talking about, I mean, I know at one point, I think my editors called me and to say, well, maybe actually you need probably to create you know, other animals, and because I think, you know, these, and it was quite strange, because I said, okay, so who are these people who actually have identified themselves? Because the very reason why I draw these animals is sort of to represent sort of class and of corrupt politicians and greedy people. And so who are these people? But there was pressure to drop those characters, which I flat out refused. And I think my editors were also smart enough not to push that agenda. So I think that has happened, and it has been fascinating for me, because I think I draw the deputy president with the turban. He has complained, and through his people, and they've literally tried to you know, to have me stop, basically, to draw him with a turban. I have also flat out refused. I mean, I have even, you know, they've done that even through some editors, where I've been approached to say, oh, you know, the DP is very unhappy with what you're doing, and I think it's time you stop drawing him with a turban. And I've politely refused, because these are the dangers of what we face. Because the moment also you give politician an inch, then of course they will take a whole yard. And I think I suppose the very notion that cartoons can address power and the centrality of it, I think that pisses off politicians. That actually they cannot actually fathom the idea that actually these creatures called cartoonists can dare actually to question, can dare to address me. I think that is at the very central of their actions.
Oh, well, yeah, there are a lot of cartoons out there that have really, really rubbed politicians the wrong way. And I guess the point that Gado is making is tied to this whole notion. I think they ask themselves, who does he think he is? How dare he, be able to, put it all out there, let it hang loose, and that really pisses them off. I have had my own experiences while I was a cartoonist for a local daily a couple of years back, and I also drew a cartoon of the said politician with the turban, and I think that was way before when a school playground was being grabbed in Langata, and it nearly cost my job at that time. So we get to experience the pushback and and the wrath. It may not come directly to us, but through our editors, and it could eventually cost your job. I refuse to change a certain way I used to do my work while working for, let me not mention the newspaper, but it was the shareholding was majorly the powers that be, and I had to opt out rather than try and change how I want to express my opinions.
Alaa?
Yeah, I haven't actually been through a situation where I've faced a problem or got nearly fired or anything like that, because most of my work is actually social media based. But I understand the idea of politicians being very sensitive towards cartoons, because the thing they're trying to show that they are powerful, untouchable creatures. So with humor, or you are like making fun of them, you're kind of tearing down that power wall, and that what makes them react so aggressively. And it's really interesting to see how these boundaries are being pushed from one place to another. Like if it's a country that has so many boundaries and so many restrictions, maybe the boundaries are not as pushed very, very, very hard like some other countries who have more democracy. So, but this is, I think, the cartoonist's job. That doesn't make anyone's work more important than the other. I think it's just all about like reading the situation, seeing what kind of boundaries you can push, and just try to push that a bit further every time. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. That was a very, very insightful and stimulating discussion, and I'm really glad that you all made the time to participate. So I say thank you to Alaa Satir, to Celeste Wamiru, and Jonathan Shapiro, and our very own Gado as well. Thank you so much for granting us this time. Very, very grateful. Keep safe. Keep drawing truth to power. It gives us great joy and pride. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, John.